In the intriguing world of saints' causes, there's the mysterious figure of the advocatus diaboli, Latin for devil's advocate, the one who argues against the canonization of a candidate in order to uncover any character flaws or misrepresentation of the evidence favoring canonization.
Se llama prelado teólogo.
In this insightful conversation, Monsignor Royo Mejía, promoter of the faith of the Dicastery for Saints' Causes, shares his expertise on the role of the devil's advocate in the process of canonization, the evolution of this figure throughout history, and the changes implemented by Pope John Paul II to facilitate the canonization process.
I'd like to begin by asking you about the figure of the so-called devil's advocate that was introduced by Sixtus V to protect the veracity of the arguments for the promotion of the causes of new candidates for canonization. Could you tell me a bit about the origin of this figure and how it evolved through the history of the Church?
Well, first of all, the name the devil's advocate is a popular term. Sixtus V didn't establish it as the devil's advocate. They called him this way because it was his job at the end of the day to be the bad guy in the movie. In a civil or penal process, he would be more or less what we know as the auditor, he who must seek the truth in a special way, because here all we look for is the truth, in all processes, in all investigations. The process of canonization is like an investigation, and what is done is to discern God's will about a person. So, in that discernment, it is fundamental that someone assist in seeking the truth. Why? Because sometimes for excessive affection, for devotion, sometimes for distraction, sometimes for other kinds of motives, well, a figure may be presented in a way that's not adequate, because investigations haven't been carried out.
De modo no adecuado.
In 1984, John Paul II took a bit of weight from this figure, to put it that way, and he reduced his influence in order to facilitate a bit the processes of canonization. Why do you think John Paul II did this in that moment?
Con el desarrollo de las ciencias históricas,
with the development of the historical sciences, it was seen that there was always more of a necessity to dig deeper into the historical side of the causes, whether of martyrdom or also for any servant of God. The historical context, seeing the person a bit. Also, the development of the psychological sciences had a great influence, because clearly the psychology of a servant of God, of a candidate for the altars, has an influence on the person. All of this. Before, they didn't take it into account. So a series of characters came into play, which are today, for example, the relators, the historical experts that didn't exist before. They organize the work, and when the promoter of the faith arrives, and therefore the theologian, consultors, the cause is very well filtered and very much prepared. And many of the issues that could come up, to clarify them, have already been clarified. So that has made the causes much more agile.
Ya están clarificadas. Entonces eso ha agilizado mucho las causas.
In several months, World Youth Day will be celebrated in Lisbon, and there's going to be a stand there dedicated to Guido Schäffer, who is known today as the Holy Surfer. Why do you think it's important that this type of saint is presented today and that they are an example of holiness for young people?
Guido Schäffer está ya.
Guido Schäffer is already at the point that, if God wills it, the declaration of venerability will be arriving. That could even happen before the end of May. And it's a huge joy because, as you know, he's a very close-at-hand figure, a figure that can attract many young people, because clearly it is not the young person of 15 years of age that was Carlo Acutis, who is also a great figure, but in the end, he's a young man who didn't experience much of life. But Guido Schäffer was already over 30 years old when he died. So it's a person who has passed through adolescence, through his youth, toward maturity, and so has options for his life. And his life was fundamentally Jesus Christ.
Well, thank you very much, Monsignor.
It was my great pleasure.